Hey folks, I'm brownbear. Today I'll be offering my thoughts on Blizzard's recent announcement of WCS Winter 2019. I'll note right here at the start that I attended the StarCraft Community Summit prior to this year's BlizzCon. Just to be clear, everything in this video is based on public information. There are no secret reveals or hidden knowledge or anything like that. More importantly, nothing about attending the summit biases my opinions on this subject. That all being said, I put this disclaimer in to make sure any biases are completely transparent. WCS Winter consists of two 10-week, 32-person tournaments, one for Europe and one for Americas. Americas is a misleading term given that the quote-unquote Americas region consists of all non-European WCS-eligible countries except for Korea. Each tournament is run online and culminates in an offline finals for the top 6 players. Something I'd like to emphasize is that WCS Winter really only applies to the first quarter of the year, equivalent to a single circuit stop. The details for the rest of the year haven't yet been announced. The regional structure of the tournament is the clearest evidence to date that the European region is now a tier above the rest of the non-Korean world. In fact, if you read the rules, you'll notice that the tournament is region-locked, preventing Europeans from participating in the Americas division and vice versa. This isn't too surprising given last year's tournament results. Of the 4 region-locked WCS circuit stops, only 8 of the 32 round of 8 placements came from a non-European region. Half of that was from Special and NIB alone. There's a couple different ways of thinking about this. One, it's noteworthy that Blizzard quadrupled the number of players who qualify into the final tournament. 64 players qualifying across 2 divisions instead of 16 players qualifying into a single bracket. This means players are guaranteed to be put on broadcast for at least 2 matches of play, increasing players' value propositions when they seek sponsorships. This is an improvement over the group stages from the WCS circuit stops, which didn't guarantee anyone airtime unless they qualified for the round of 16. The downside of this guarantee is the way it dilutes prize winnings. A round of 32 placement at WCS Leipzig, the first WCS circuit stop of 2018, was worth $1,250 US. In WCS Winter, you need to make it all the way to the round of 8 to make at least that much money. This problem is compounded for Europeans. As I discussed previously, top 8 in Europe is similar to top 8 in all of the WCS circuit. Earning 9th through 16th in WCS Winter only nets the player $925, whereas at WCS Leipzig this was worth 3 times as much. In total, the system seems to hurt upper-tier European professionals who would have otherwise made a lot of money through a high or mid-tier placement at a WCS circuit stop. At the same time, it's very helpful to lower-tier professionals who might never have gotten broadcast time or may have lacked the resources to travel and play in the open bracket. We'll talk about these trade-offs in more detail later on after we cover more details on how the tournament will work. Next, let's discuss the qualification process. Players can qualify into the 32-person tournament in one of 2 ways. A ladder race spanning 4 days of play, and an online open qualifier. The ladder qualifiers have always felt like a missed opportunity to me, because there's no way to spectate games at the top of the ladder. I would suspect that this is because StarCraft 2's game client doesn't support any kind of live replay streaming. Meanwhile, requiring an audio-visual stream would incur an unacceptable performance overhead for professionals. In principle, the whole concept of qualifying through the ladder makes a ton of sense, but I think we've yet to figure out a good way to implement it. The other way to qualify is through the open qualifiers. These are online tournaments in which the top N players advance from each region. They're seeded by 2018 year-end WCS rankings, which feels strange at first, but actually I can't think of any better alternatives. Notably, in the Americas region, players can participate in both the Asia and America server qualifiers. This means that, except for China, which gets its own qualifier and a 4-player qualification guarantee, no individual region within the broader Americas umbrella is guaranteed placement into the 32-person tournament. This is a pretty big deal for the non-Korean, Asian, and ANZ communities. According to Wikipedia, 2 players from ANZ and 2 players from the Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and Japan region were guaranteed qualification, plus travel expenses to WCS Leipzig. Under this new system, it's possible that neither region will have any players in WCS Winter. While I think that this is unlikely, it does seem strange that they don't receive a carve-out in the way China does. Regardless, in either case, they won't receive travel benefits to an offline venue unless they qualify for the top 6. The much bigger issue is latency. Starting from the round of 32 WCS Winter phase, US West is the default fallback for the Americas division if no better alternative can be found. Asians, Australians, and South Americans will face a 2x or higher latency penalty when playing against their North American counterparts. This is a substantial disadvantage, especially at higher levels of play. Between the ladder qualifiers, open qualifiers, and China qualifiers, 32 players will qualify for the actual tournament in each division. This means 64 players in total get to participate in the tournament proper. It's possible that they'll only play 2 matches, but like I mentioned earlier, this is substantially more guaranteed visibility than the group stages of WCS circuit stops. The round of 32 and round of 16 work similarly to the GSL. Players advance through double elimination groups and are guaranteed not to face the same opponent in both rounds. The round of 8 is a round robin to determine seeding, followed by a boss rush format top 6 offline tournament. I'd like to spend some time talking about this format change because I think it's a big deal. The GSL is an incredible tournament for several reasons. One is the way it builds storylines. Each day of play is comprised of 4 players playing 5 matches. This enables viewers to really focus on a set of matches, and focus on the players within those matches, and follow along with them as they proceed through the tournament. This is much more engaging than the weekender format of WCS circuit stops, at least for me personally. The rapid pace and sheer quantity of games makes it harder to craft storylines in that case. The GSL format is also great because it raises the overall quality of games by allowing players to study and prepare for their opponents. The small number of matches on any given day also ensures that competitors are well rested and can give 100% to all of their games. These and other factors raise the overall level of play and generally make the tournament more enjoyable to watch. A third great thing about GSL is the scheduling. Generally speaking, there are 4 matches a week spread across 2 days. Blizzard hasn't specified how WCS Winter will work, but given the 10-week time period, I guess it'll feature something similar, maybe a little faster. The recurring nature of this kind of tournament allows you to build it into your schedule. You end up looking forward to it a lot over the course of the day or the week, especially if you're a fan of one of the players. In combination, there's just no comparison between a weekend tournament and the long-form format of the GSL. The scene benefits from having both, but I can only speak for myself when I say that I strongly prefer the longer-form format. That said, I have no idea what the impact will be on viewership, so I'm very curious to see how that turns out. While the GSL moves to a bracket stage in the round of 8, WCS Winter will instead use a round robin. This is likely substantially cheaper and faster to produce because it can all be run in a single day, similar to the SSL qualifiers back in 2016. This partially negates the benefits of the GSL style system in previous rounds, because it's very difficult to broadcast every match from the round robin stage. Even if you could, it's impossible to craft interesting storylines when so many games are happening so quickly. In general, I don't like this, and I would prefer a true to form 4 in GSL, but from a production standpoint I can understand why they did it this way. The top 6 players from the round robin move on to a boss rush offline finals. I call this a boss rush because each player needs to successively beat all of the higher ranked players in order to win the whole thing. The first seeded player is kind of like a final boss who only needs to win a single match in order to win the whole thing. This might sound a little unfair, but given that the seeding is based off of the round robin stage, it makes total sense. If you're placed at rank N after playing every other person in the top 8, it makes sense to guarantee a placement in the top N+1. I like this format because it's very conducive to storylines. For one thing, it repeats games from the round robin, meaning compelling rematches and potential grudge matches. For another, it enables a running theme throughout the entire event. Can this underdog go all the way against all of these bosses? When a boss wins, they immediately switch roles, enabling the underdog storyline to continue. On top of all this, you also have the final boss, a kind of looming specter that everyone gets compared against. In sum, I think WCS Winter works out differently for Europe and the Americas. When it comes to Europe, I see it as a kind of foreign GSL. Given how much I prefer that format, I'm actually really excited about it, regardless of the fact that it's online. There are some structural issues with regards to moving money away from Tier 1 Europeans, but I think the increase in visibility will benefit the scene as a whole. The rising tide lifts all boats, and all of that. When it comes to the Americas region, it's more of a mixed bag. Asian and ANZ players may not even make it into WCS Winter. The elimination of prizes and travel benefits from the qualifiers also means that the overall compensation has gone down. A free trip to Europe is a much bigger deal for someone from Asia or Australia than it is for someone who already lives there. You could argue that's a prize in and of itself. Asians, South Americans, and ANZ players will also suffer a substantial latency penalty against anyone playing from the United States or Canada. The corollary is that mid-tier North Americans ought to do better in this system than they did in the previous one, sadly also in part thanks to the latency disadvantage of their opponents. Both regions see cost cutting in the round of 8 given the move from a bracket to a round robin. Both regions also get all of the benefits of the GSL style format. Long-running storylines, prepared games, well-rested competitors, high viewer engagement, recurring schedules, and so on and so on. And that's about it. Overall, I'm quite excited for WCS Winter. I love the longer-paced tournament format, I love the boss rush finale, and I love the simultaneous storylines of the European and American divisions. This format lays the groundwork for a clash later on in the year. Similar to how foreigners versus Koreans is such an interesting storyline, this year we'll get to have that, plus Europeans versus non-Korea rest of world. Maybe we should come up with a catchier name. I do recognize that this isn't a one-for-one trade with a WCS circuit stop. The lack of travel benefits and the substantial latency penalty paid by certain regions kind of speak for themselves. The only consolation is that this is only for WCS Winter. The announcement confirms that the WCS circuit will also continue in 2019, so it's not all doom and gloom. Alrighty, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you followed me here and on Twitter and Facebook to receive regular content updates. The relevant links are in the description below. All the best, and see you next time.